Hello, this is Frank Falvey with Frank Presents, and it is my great honor to have a co-host with me today. I was going to say honorable, the honorable.
I am honorable, but not in that way.
Steve Sherlock, who is with Franklin Matters. But most of all, we have a special guest and current member of the school committee, incumbent. Welcome, Dave Callaghan.
Thank you both very much. I really appreciate this.
Long time no see.
And I appreciate the opportunity to speak with both of you, and just to talk about Franklin and about the school committee.
Yeah, it's been since the last election. Frank and I have talked from time to time, but as you may be aware, in some of the run-up to this, one of the things that we did as the studio was surveyed the electorate in terms of how can we improve delivering info. And one of the feedbacks they gave us was that Frank respectfully did some video, I did some audio, and some candidates chose to do text. But respectfully, some of the community members only could get the text, but they really wanted the video, or vice versa. So we're collaborating, makes it a little easier for you from a schedule perspective. You don't have to negotiate. We got us both. And then we'll take the video, extract the audio, and then produce a transcript so that the voters and the residents will get all the info in whatever format they want. So I think it's a great service that we're attempting to provide.
No, I really appreciate, like you said, especially on the scheduling, standpoint is great. But then also, just to be able to kind of provide as many, vehicles and for everybody to pick up, because there's a lot of candidates, there's a lot of different issues, and even though it's not a hotly contested election this time around, it's still incredibly important just to get to know everybody.
So tell us about yourself.
So my wife and I came to Franklin in 2010 to looking to start a family, and really chose Franklin because of its incredible schools and the public safety aspect as well. And then, now kind of flash forward 13 years, and I got my daughter is a 7th grader over at Horace Mann, and my little guy is a 1st grader at Kennedy. And just been absolutely loving everything that Franklin has had to offer. And for quite some time, I always thought about getting back into town governance, where I was before. I served as the chairman of the town traffic committee. And so I'd always thought about kind of tossing my hat back in that ring. And finally, it was the summer of 2020 when we had 103 teachers that were let go because of just financial concerns, that I kind of realized I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to get back in and to be able to help do my part to, however I might be able to kind of guide the financial stability of the Franklin Public Schools moving forward. And so that's kind of what brought me in, and that's what is keeping me around for another term right now.
It's a good point. We can pick up on that too, because effectively you became engaged. You had been prior, which is good, and then you came engaged here, which is even better from a Franklin perspective, so we appreciate that. And the question that it leads to is then clearly citizen engagement also requires voter engagement. So can you speak to the voter aspect of that? Because we've certainly seen low turnouts for the local elections, which are effectively the most important elections.
Yeah, it's something where, to be an active voter, I take so much pride in myself, and how often, like when I go to the polls and how engaged I try to be when I go as well, and I try to pass that down to my kids as well. It's always been, election day is a holiday over at home, and I'll bring the kids into the ballot boxes, and we'll kind of have conversations leading up to it. I love, as silly as this is, when the Secretary of the Commonwealth, when they'll send out those notices, I kind of talk about, here are the issues that are coming up, here's the legalese, and here's how the breakdown is.
The red book.
Yeah, those red books. I'll sit down at the kitchen table and we'll talk to the kids about it to kind of explain what's going on. And so that's something that I've really tried to instill in my kids as well, because it's so incredibly important to be an active voter, and I'm prideful of my voting record, and I can't wait to see what my kids kind of grow up to as well, and hopefully be able to get that with them as well.
Yeah, and drawing upon your background, clearly you've already been on the one term of the school committee as it's coming now, but for those listeners who may not have paid attention, or for certainly the voters who are going to be prepared for November 7th, What is it from your background that you really bring to the table from a school committee perspective, some of the strengths that you can bring to help the school committee, because we'll get into that in a little bit. You've got some issues ahead of you.
Yes, whoever the 7 are that make up the school committee for next term, we have a lot of work ahead of us. But I work in the public sector, and I've worked in the public sector for about 15 years, and prior to that, have a master's in public administration when I went to grad school. And I really felt like through my work and through my education, was really able to bring a better understanding about how some of the committee work needs to get done, because that's really one of the biggest things is the work that's done at the subcommittee levels. For the school committee, it's typically about 3 individuals that make up some of these smaller committees where so much work is being done. And it was through that I do a lot of policy writing professionally, and one of the bigger obstacles that we really kind of looked to address when we first this term first came around is I served as the chairman of the policy subcommittee, and we really rewrote from the ground up the bullying and the harassment and discrimination policies. And it was a 6-month process of rewrites and research and getting legal counsel to make sure that everything was on the level. But once that went and passed, then it in turn forced the administration to completely change up their protocols and their practices. And we really looked to strengthen the safety of the students especially when it comes to bullying. And again, while it was about a 6-month process, I do feel that with just like the background that I already have, was able to really help navigate that and push that along to provide a much better product and a better safety for a lot of our students. But then now, 2 years into the school committee, I have the pleasure of serving on the budget subcommittee, along with the joint budget subcommittee, which is composed of members of the school committee and town council and FinCom. And it's 2 years of meetings, 2 budget seasons, which are typically kind of falls. It's spring budget and then summer seasons, and it's quite a lot of work. But I've learned a great deal, and I'm hopeful that moving forward, especially through the joint budget subcommittee, we'll be able to kind of continue along with the work and the momentum that we've already done to really help strengthen and Franklin's financial stability.
Yeah, because for those who certainly many should be aware, but the school budget accounts for, I think it's 55% of the town budget. So that's one of the reasons why I've been clearly following it along the way. You've got some systemic issues in there, clearly where your costs seem to be rising more than the town is willing to, or at least fund accordingly through Chapter 70, which is the separate piece. So yeah, speak to some of the challenges you're going to have next year and what you're hoping to do with the new committee to be able to address those.
Yeah, so we've already in the last budget season there was a substantial amount of cuts that needed to be made in order just to kind of keep the books viable for one more year. One of the major cuts that had occurred was across there was cuts for after school clubs. All at the time middle school clubs were eliminated, and there was also an increase in the user fees as well that was being discussed. This is something, for instance, to take your kid to have them ride the bus. It's $350 just to sign your child up, to have them get picked up and dropped off by the bus.
Right.
And while looking at a lot of these fees, one of the things we kind of realized, one is that when many of these fees, like the bus fee, even that high price tag only accounts for actually about 40% of the total transportation cost.
Yeah.
The town, the Franklin budget is picking up the other 60%. And also, when I started looking at the particular fees that we were charging, and also kind of comparing to a lot of other communities, I think there is some maneuverability that we have within our existing fee structure to kind of make it both more equitable towards the actual programs that we're offering, but also to make it so that the programs can operate more sustainably throughout the budget as well. But in addition to that, one of the things, one of my favorite classes when I was in grad school was grant writing. And in this class, we wound up, we actually had to, we kind of partner up, and we had to find a actual grant that was out there, and we kind of had to develop a program, and we had to write a grant and try to seek funding for the grant and work with another, like our case, it was a community organization this is outside of Worcester, but actually work to try to secure a grant to get this program up and running. It always made me so excited about the prospect of grants, and that's something where a lot of the meetings I've kept kind of bringing up and mentioning anytime that we've been able to secure a successful grant. And to be clear, when I say it's the Superintendent Shakir and his office are doing a fantastic job.
And a lot of the teachers generally facilitate some of those grant opportunities as well, too.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a complete, like the entire district is really working towards securing a lot of grants. One of the things that would be fantastic is, and I've mentioned this at some meetings, but would be able to hire a professional grant writer.
The state of Massachusetts has said it's going to pay for all food costs for every student in the state of Massachusetts. Well, last I knew, there was a small percentage of people that were getting that grant. When you look at the cost offset, wouldn't that money be better spent going more directly to the schools instead of paying for every student?
I think that when they kind of talk about, when you mentioned about some of those small numbers, this is something that we kind of brought up a couple of times throughout our meetings when talking about ensuring families sign up for what was the old free and reduced lunch program, because there are a number of families who do qualify for it, but don't submit the applications, whether or not for its modesty or they just unaware in the same fashion.
Choice.
It's certainly the choice, but it's at the same time, it's typically not the child's choice. And I think there's also a lot of individuals who are kind of right on that cusp, where like they might not necessarily fall below that poverty level, but where having meals consistently and food stability isn't guaranteed.
Your school bus system, you're now on a two-tier start time and a two-tier dismissal time. Would you give thoughts of engaging the school bus company into looking at a three-tier system?
I think right now, especially when it comes to transportation, the cost of transportation, all avenues should be pursued. If there are savings to be found, we definitely need to be able to have some of those conversations. From my understanding, one of the bigger drivers would be whether or not in terms of our own school start times. And I know that this was something that was very big kind of pre-COVID, a lot of conversations about changing up the school start times, specifically at the middle school level. The focus there, largely, from my understanding, was just about amount of sleep that the children need compared to what they were getting when they were having to wake up at certain hours in order to kind of catch the bus or just to make it to school if the parents weren't able to pay $350.
They get out of school pretty early. You could set the times later and still have enough time for sleep.
Yeah, that was a lot of the suggestions that came out of it. The committee really kind of took a very deep dive into all these issues. And then as some of the decisions were kind of coming out, unfortunately, they had to be put to bed because there were significant budgetary issues that were facing the Franklin Public Schools. And at the time, Dr. Sarah Hearn elected to focus all of her attention on the budget hearings and subsequently a lot of the budget cuts. And then with the idea that we will in time pull this idea back up, And then March of 2020 came around, and there was other priorities that they had. So this was something that was never readdressed.
On
since.
October 24th, we're voting for a new tri-county high school. When do you anticipate the next school building will have to be built?
So this is something that's, to me, really exciting. And I understand that I might use that term maybe a little loosely. But so the Franklin School Committee, we just kicked off that right now it's a comprehensive facilities school planning subcommittee. It's effectively what we're really looking at, and I'm chairing this committee, is threefold. One, we're doing a very deep down, detailed review of every facility that we currently have. We're taking a look at all of the updated population numbers, along with the population trends as well, to kind of forecast where enrollment's going to be over the coming years and decades.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're also going to take a look at the educational vision of Franklin, because to go pre-K to senior today is a heck of a lot different than it was when I went to school, and as well as for when you gentlemen went to school as well. But what we're going to be looking at over a long period of time is all the buildings that we have, the enrollment trends for the decades to come, and then where do we think that Franklin's educational system can and should be, and then how do we use the buildings to get there? So to answer that question is going to be many more hours of committee work. It was just about 2 weeks ago that we really kind of kicked off this meeting, but it's definitely something that we're extremely interested in and to looking into. I know that the time that it takes to plan and to actually open and construct a building can take a significantly long number of years and years and years. But at this point, we're really just looking to just to kind of start figuring that out and taking a long-term look about where Franklin is and where it needs to be and how do we get there.
So for the next 5 years, I don't need to worry about funding a new school building?
Not for Franklin.
Yeah, not for us. Now,
Franklin.
I will say when it comes to Tri-County, they got, there's the vote on the 24th
Right, but
and
I'm
then possibly a
talking
debt
strictly
exclusion.
Franklin.
I don't anticipate that happening in the next 5 years, no, sir.
Policy Committee.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe personally that there's any policy that the school committee or the implementation of that policy interferes with your parent responsibility?
No. That was one of the, when I mentioned earlier about starting with the bullying, it later expanded to harassment, discrimination, but starting with the bullying. If anything, this really gave parents, strengthened parents' abilities to be able to kind of hold administration accountable. The biggest problem that I had seen with the policy, the bullying policy as written, was that once an event was reported, was identified, that administration just had to conclude a report and investigate timely. And timely was the specific word that really kind of zeroed me in and got me upset,
Mm-hmm.
because timely might mean three different things to the three of us. And so it was that really kind of kicked off the entire rewrite of the bullying policy, because we needed to be able to say, no, it's not timely, it's a set number of days. And we even had conversations about, well, what if is it school days, is it business days, is it the end of 1 year, does it carry over to the next year? And we said, no, we're keeping the scope very narrow and the specific days, very defined, so that way, if there are incidents, that parents have the right as policy in black and white to say, hold on a second, this event happened to my child on this date, and so there is an expectation in the policy of the school committee that the superintendent has to adhere to, along with the staff, to say you have this many days in order to kind of come back with a lot of those updates. So no, I don't think there's anything that's, if anything, we've just strengthened parental rights.
I'm a graduate of the oldest public high school in the United States of America, Boston English High School. Our nebulous Latin was a prep for Harvard University. Latin school has a $50 million endowment. English has a much smaller one than that. endowments for the Franklin High School. We have got to have some outstanding graduates graduate from Franklin High School now. What about the idea of establishing an alumni association that would actively seek not only for scholarships, but kind of research and point out who might be a candidate for endowing or appreciating in general the graduates of Franklin High School that would appreciate in some way, either through scholarships or through endowments of an alumni association, be in Franklin. Is that something you would advocate, or has anyone talked about it?
No, it's there's certainly some great ideas. I know that from central office perspective, from within the district itself, it would likely kind of have to be a volunteer organization, at least right now, because unfortunately, in the same fashion with the grant writing, right now Franklin just can't afford teachers that it currently has. That's why there was layoffs last season, and right now, like, Franklin can't afford middle school clubs. That's why those had to be cut. And so when there's so many activities and structures that we currently have that we can't afford, it's very difficult in the same fashion with the grant writer to then be able to say, well, we are going to expand in this area, because the facts of the matter is that unfortunately right now Franklin public schools can't afford to expand.
Steve, you're familiar with the school committee budget. Do you have a question?
Well, a number. For the purposes of this, let me go back a little to the Tri-County piece, to the extent that clearly Tri-County, as we've discussed, I think the vote to approve is October 24. Then also the town council will be looking to potentially put it on the ballot question on November 7. That's not your responsibility from a Franklin School Committee perspective to advocate for the Tri-County, although clearly they're schools, it's a school budget, they need their money, but it's not yours. I just wanted to clarify for the listeners and voters, and I would think you would agree with that. You can assist them, but they have to take the lead on that.
That's correct.
Okay.
And it certainly there would be implications. Where when sitting on the joint budget subcommittee, where Jamie Helen really kind of took a look at the 5-year forecast, the possible debt exclusion vote for Tri-County is a very big question mark over the next 5 years, because if it doesn't come through as a debt exclusion, and but yet the majority of the communities go to vote for it. And because again, that's kind of the nuanced one. And again, they have their own advocates. But I'm here. I sat in some of the meetings. What's interesting is that when it comes to the Tri-County, that Franklin itself could say no. But if every other community overwhelmingly says yes, it's 50% plus one amongst all of the communities that go out and vote that day. And so then when it comes to the debt exclusion, if it's something that's going to be moving forward with the Tri-County vote, and you mentioned there are advocates out there, but there's a lot of great information to kind of say where it could be beneficial and how it would be beneficial. But again, even if we end up saying no to that debt exclusion, but all those communities say yes, we're going to build it, it's being built. And so now suddenly the money that we have to cough up for that the building process will be coming out of the operational budget. And there's going to be a direct impact to the schools and to every other department that's out there. And so while I'm not sitting on any of those boards, I will say it certainly at this moment seems like it would behoove the Franklin Public Schools, if that debt exclusion were to be passed, is it's just going to be, it's not going to be money that's going to be further cutting the budget that we already can't afford.
Yeah.
What is the question that I haven't asked you that you want to give your expertise for the public to know?
Well, one thing that I think that we had a lot of great discussions. One of the things what I would love to talk about now too is because when you talk about grant writing, it is so important. And while right now it doesn't seem like that's something that Franklin's budget can't afford, what I have been done when you talk about alumni too, I went back to my old University, where I got went to graduate school. Because again, we had our own grant writing class that they actually still do have as well. And I spoke to the professor over there just to say, as you're starting to have a new class, and they have it, it's usually in the January, it starts to come up. But as you're having new students come in, and as you're having students look to align themselves with certain departments or certain organizations to write grants for, let me know. I'd love to go. I'm hopefully have the opportunity to kind of go back to my college campus and speak to some of these students, because if we're, while we can't afford a grant writer right now, if we're able to have some, graduate students be able to work together and work with the town and help to write some grants, I think that'll be a fantastic way to help raise revenue and, help that budget situation just a little bit more.
Mm-hmm. And as we're getting to close, I'll just give a plug as well that thanks to Dave and the other Dave McNeil, who at least on the most recent chalkboard chat, got into, and we're getting into a process where we'll recap the school committees with a podcast. So for the listeners, if you haven't already heard them, tune in, and certainly going forward, everything willing, schedule-wise, et cetera, that will continue, so you'll be able to find out more of current issues beyond the election.
Because I know that oftentimes, the school committee meetings themselves, they run a little bit late. Some have accused me of being a bit long-winded and having stuff to say, but we do on these chalkboard chats, we try to condense it down to within about 30 minutes. So it's a quick little listen to get yourself up to speed on the issues that we've had and get a little bit of backstory and how we got there and where we're going as well.
Well, for the viewing public, the listening public, and the reading public, because this is all three formats, for Dave Callaghan, Steve Sherlock, and Frank Falvey, we encourage you to watch, listen to, or read this program, and we all hope to see you at the election on November 7th, and please say hello to each one of us.
This program was made possible by your Franklin friends and neighbors, good folks just like you. Thanks for supporting Franklin TV. And thanks for watching.